I came back to the motherland and logged on for our podcast to give you, Danielle, this news, because right before we started hitting record, you did not know this. And I want to ask you about this.
Please.
Representative Byron Donalds.
Remind the people who he is.
I think Trump's favorite black now. It's between him and Tim Scott, Republican representative from Florida, who's gunning for the VP position, said black people were better off under Jim Crow, which inspired Hakeem Jeffries to do a passionate response in the U.S. House, which was carried on C-SPAN just a few hours ago. Danielle, I had to ask you, as a representative of all black people,
please,
were your people better off under Jim Crow, according to Byron Donalds, who himself is black, by the way?
Right. And here's where I will start off, and I will remind folks that not all skin folk are kinfolk. And Byron Donalds is the Samuel L. Jackson character from Django, Stephen, of the House of Representatives. Now, yes,
as he cradled Leo's dead body,
as he cradled Massa's dead body and screamed no with like this fervent, gasp of grief and trauma. That is who Byron Donald is. And people will say to me, well, black people are not a monolith. Oh, I fucking know that. But I also know that there's a particular type of black person that exists inside of the Republican Party that is embraced by the Republican Party because of their allegiance to white supremacy. What do I mean by that? I mean being able to defame, to degrade your entire community, right? To blame, right? The systems of oppression that we know are in place because they have been litigated and are right now being relitigated by white supremacists to turn the clock back. But so long as people like Donald Trump can have the Byron Donalds and the Tim Scotts and those that put on blackface, right? And get those big bucks on Fox News and in other places like the Candace Owens of the world. Like, this should not shock anybody that Byron Donalds would make such an absurd fucking ridiculous claim. And understand, better off under Jim Crow, motherfucker, you wouldn't have a job. Let me just explain to you that there were no black representatives,
especially in
Florida.
Jim
Crow, in Florida, let alone. So unless you feel like you haven't earned your position and you would rather be in a position to shine Mike Johnson's shoes, right? And follow around him holding his briefcase saying, yes, sir, and no, sir, then yes, maybe Jim Crow would have been better for Byron Donalds.
Because oftentimes what's common to us isn't common to everyone, and it's our job to connect the dots. And we assume that Americans know about Jim Crow, right? But people, as we have seen in the past 3 years, have just woken up to the fact that police kill black people. And, some dark humor there, but some dark humor is necessary because you think everyone knows this, but a lot of folks in utmost sincerity, I was listening to NPR and they were like talking to these Midwestern white suburban moms who, as a result of the George Floyd protests, were like, we had heard about this, but that really opened up our eyes. And what's common to us, again, isn't common to everyone. So Danielle, if you can, briefly, can you just educate folks as to what Jim Crow was? And you touched upon it, but what life was like for black folks post-Civil War,
right.
post-quote-unquote emancipation.
So this is post-Civil War. This is post-Reconstruction. After 12 years of Reconstruction, where the country had been in a place where now they have millions of emancipated black people, right, who are living free inside of a country that they created, built through blood, sweat, tears, and their lives, the entire infrastructure for capitalism, right, for growth, for the GDP in this country. There's this 12 years of Reconstruction where black people are able to run for office, are able to go to school. You're starting to see the country come back together. But guess who did not like that? The white Southern plantation owners who lost their property that allowed them to have a very comfortable life and existence because of the end of slavery. So they strike a deal, right, with who was it at the time? Was it Rutherford B. Hayes? Was it Hayes?
That's the post-Reconstruction era, right? Was it
Yeah.
Hayes?
Yeah, I think it's Hayes. They strike a deal with the president at the time, which essentially allows for them to create the system of Jim Crow. What is Jim Crow? Jim Crow was the first and the blueprint for apartheid, right? It was the blueprint that Hitler used to segregate the Jewish population in Germany before he would exterminate them, right? It is a multiple tiered system in which Black people are at the bottom. There are no rules, right? Plessy versus Ferguson. There are no rights that a Black man has that a white man must observe, right?
Dred Scott.
So there is separation in terms of dining, living. You can't sunset laws, meaning that a Black person cannot be found to be in a town or a place that has sunset laws after sunset because they could be lynched. If you're lynched, beaten, murdered, if your boss doesn't pay you, you have no rights, right? You are living at the whim of white people and white existence. And for 100 years, that was the law of the land in the South and in the Midwest. Now, I don't want folks to get it twisted and think that during the Great Migration, which again is not studied in schools, during the Great Migration, which was when over the course of, I think it was a few decades, Black people leave the South in droves and they head to the North and they head to places like Illinois and Ohio. They head to the Midwest to try and get to live and to seek a better life for themselves. While there was deep discrimination and racism in those places, there was not institutionalized segregation in those places that would have, Black men hung from trees, Black children beaten to death, Black women raped on a regular basis, and that just be what it is. So for Byron Donalds to have the audacity to say that after 300 years of enslavement and then 100 years of apartheid, that somehow Black people were better under Jim Crow, I swear to God, I hope that the ancestors do their job with Byron Donalds.
I mean, it is remarkable because sometimes these things do shock you because we've talked about this on the show before. And it's not just relegated to Black folks. It's people of color who voluntarily allow themselves to be used as Manchurian candidates, as the alpha South Asian Karen like Nikki Haley, as the token brown like Vivek Ramaswamy, who sits there with a smile on his face, as Ann Coulter openly says, "I'll never vote for you because you're brown." He goes, "Oh, I can respect that." That was, I think, 2 weeks ago. Nikki Haley, who again was mocked and ridiculed by Ann Coulter for being South Asian. She didn't clap back against her, but threw Raphael Warnock under the bus, a Black man, and said for him to go back, right? That this is common amongst all of our communities of color. We've seen these, what I call cultural validators. They allow their brown and Black skin as a type of a money laundering system for white supremacy. Because if they come in as the token, how can then the GOP be racist? I mean, look at me. They support me. I'm a Republican representative in Florida. My name is Byron Donalds, and Trump loves me, and I might be his VP. You all are just being race hustlers. Get over it. Pick yourself up from the bootstrap. This is why it's so dangerous. And to extend it, oftentimes I've told, and I've said this to a lot of Jewish friends from 2016 onward, especially with the rise of Trump, to a lot of our Jewish friends who assume they're white, who have passed as white, who thought they were part and parcel of whiteness. I remember I gave a talk in New York. It was part of the New Yorker Festival. Jelani Cobbin invited me. And there was a man who raised his hand and he says, "Listen, I'm Jewish American, born and raised in New York. I always thought I was white." And this was like during the Trump presidency. And he goes, I'm just shocked. Like, white white folks don't see me as white. And he was like having a come to Jesus moment. I'm saying this figuratively, no offense to Jews. And I say this because here we are right now in 2024, and we're seeing some black folks, some brown folks, some Muslim folks, and some Jewish folks, as a result of this war in Gaza, say, you know what, we're going to align ourselves with Trump and the GOP because they're pro-Israel. And a news item that I think deserves a little bit more focus that hasn't come into focus is Miriam Adelson, the billionaire widow of hard-right pro-Zionist Sheldon Adelson, who supported the settlements, has apparently told Donald Trump, who's courting her support and specifically $2 million of her money, that she will give him the money if he promises to annex the West Bank. As this is happening, Donald Trump is aligned with white supremacists and Christian nationalists. And so, as this war is going on, Danielle, what do you say to Jews who are like, you know what? I'll be okay. They'll like me. They're pro-Israel. I'm going to align myself with Mike Johnson, who is a Christian nationalist, who's only pro-Israel because evangelical Christians believe that Jews need to control Jerusalem before Jesus comes back. And who are the first two people he destroys? Anyone want to take a guess? Jews and Muslims. And even though they traffic with anti-Semites and white supremacists, they're pro-Israel. And if they promise to annex the West Bank, I'll give them my money and my vote.